All right. Yeah. Like I said, these five guys, these five late night talk show hosts, they are they're starting something called Strike Force 5 and they are on fire, unfortunately. So they've topped the Spotify podcast list quickly. Like I don't know how this okay, so I don't know if anybody can enlighten me on this, how this podcast the top um podcast list on Spotify works. If it's something where they do week to week or they do who's the biggest movements up, who's being viewed the most, in any given week. I don't know exactly the metrics behind it, but I do know that these guys are the top of it right now. And if I wasn't so if I wasn't so turned off by the bullshit liberal woke establishment movement, I like these guys. I actually think they're funny. So every one of them, all five of them, and I used to watch some of their stuff, but when they were less political, and then suddenly the climate moved very political, and these guys are just on the left, very left, obviously being controlled by whatever um, network that they're on, which doesn't really explain to me John Oliver because he's on HBO. So you've got control, buddy. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know why you're placating to this bullshit. I used to think he was pretty centrist, but he doesn't seem to be very centrist at this point. Anyways, so let's kind of get into this. Let's see what this is an article by The Wrap. It's not I don't know. Never really even heard of these guys, so I don't know what to say. I'm not going to disparage them in any way. But let's see what they have to say about this. So, late night hosts podcast Strike Force 5 top Spotify, Apple charts in debut week. Pretty impressive. Got to give it credit. But these are five well-known name people getting into one podcast. It's kind of, it's going to be a home run pretty much anytime, I would think. So here we go. Strike Force 5, the podcast started by late night hosts Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, Seth Myers, and John Oliver, amid the ongoing Hollywood double strike, has climbed to the top of Spotify and Apple Music's podcast charts within 2 days of its premiere. On Friday, the first episode of the series stood as the number one podcast on Spotify and Apple in the US and also the top news podcast on both. The podcast will release its next episode on Sunday, September 3rd, as the second of at least 12 episodes of the series. Oh, so this is a series. Okay, so hopefully, well, I mean, if it's probably going to be an extended series now if they're doing so well. But here we go. Strike Force 5, which was inspired by weekly conversations the hosts began having at the onset of the WGA strike, which is the Hollywood strike, the Writers Guild strike, benefits out-of-work staffers from the host shows who have been on strike since May. All proceeds received from the podcast will go to staffers from the Late Night Show, or the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, the Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel Live, Late Night with Seth Myers, and Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. Okay, but I'll stop right there. That's pretty cool. I'll be honest. Regardless of what their views are, that's cool that they're giving the money back to their writers and such. If that's legit and they're actually doing that, I like that. What do you have to say here, Joe? Let me see here. I can't read it very well on this, so I have to get it on here. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think they did any more views than Joe Rogan. I think that's I think that's weird, but maybe it's because they grew so fast so quickly that's what I'm talking about with the metrics. I don't know how the metrics work necessarily. I can't see anybody topping Joe Rogan at this point. Even the second to Joe Rogan doesn't touch Joe Rogan. So if they did top him, I think it's like sort of like a flash in the pan type thing. Maybe it was a low week for Joe, high week for these guys because whatever. There's a lot of people looking to them, and I mean we can't take away the fact that there are five of them. So you have five different hosts that are bringing potentially five different audiences to come check this out. I don't know what kind of, marketing they did for this or what, but yeah. Yeah, and I agree. Cringe fest. But they are cringe fest, but at the same time, I think Jimmy Fallon's hilarious. If you get Jimmy Fallon on Saturday Night Live with Justin Timberlake, for example, holy shit, man, they were funny. When you take politics and like the puppeteering bullshit out of him, I think he's funny as fuck. I think pretty much all of them are quite funny. What makes it unfunny is this whole you can almost see the strings. They're so controlled. It's pathetic. But I agree with you. It is cringe when you watch them talking and just they're just ripping on whatever the narrative is that's fed to them by their parent organization. So, but yeah, so here's the top list on the podcast list here. We got Strike Force 5 on the top, Joe Rogan Experience on in second. Handsome. This one's got to be awful. This Handsome podcast with Tig Notaro, Fortune Feimster, and Mae Martin. I can't see that being anything but a complete dumpster fire. But all right, somehow it's third. This kind of thing scares me when I see that. When I see these awful, um, just I don't want to say awful people. They're just awful awful podcasts. They're not awful people. They're maybe they're just placating to an audience that they think they can win, and they're trying to make money there, and whatever. That's fine. I mean, I'm sure people that sell porn aren't into it. Some I'm sure are, but there are I'm sure a lot of people that sell porn are like, it's just a way to make money, right? So I don't disparage somebody for trying to make money, but these people are just the worst. And then it was funny actually because I just talked about this a couple of weeks back. The PBD podcast, 38th. So again, I don't know how these. I really don't know how these work. These lists, these Spotify lists. PBD dropped from 10 to 38 in what 2 weeks. So I don't know. This has got to be something where they maybe either do daily or they do weekly or whatever the case is. I wouldn't hold too much on this. The fact that they're number one right now. I will check it out because I do want to have an informed perspective on this and see how good or bad it is. I'm suspecting it's going to be bad, but maybe I'm surprised. Who knows? I'll let you know.